First, I want to give credit where credit is due. Being from Toronto, Canada, I am very lucky because there are a lot of excellent acupuncturists here. So the work that I'm being recognized for is merely my small contribution building on the shoulder of giants ahead of me. And I want to recognize two teachers that are directly or indirectly mentors of mine. One of them is Dr. Joseph Wong, who is the author of Neuroanatomical Acupuncture. Dr. Joseph Wong is an acupuncturist, Chinese medicine practitioner, and a Western MD physiatrist. He was the person that started teaching acupuncture in an anatomical way. One of his students, Dr. Alejandro Elorriaga, who is a sports medicine doctor out of McMaster University in Hamilton, Ontario, was the person that I took a Western anatomical acupuncture program with. Those people are directly responsible for, giving me the curiosity to dive into the classic and then systematically go through every single acupuncture point, including over 50 extra points in the body, and try to figure out what is this that the ancients have passed down to us. So thank you, Matthew and Lauren, for giving me the platform to do this. I will attempt to summarize more than 10 years of my research and just give you a little bit of flavor by choosing points that represent different parts of the human anatomy, points on the arm, on the face, on the torso, and on the leg. So you get the idea that this is not a coincidence. This is a phenomenon that is translatable to all the acupuncture points in the body. But due to the time limitations that we have, I can only share maybe 10 points with you. What you're looking at here in this slide is the points lung 3 and lung 4. There are obviously points on the upper arm. And one of the things that really excites me about acupuncture is to find points that are very close to each other that do completely different things. That shows to me that there's a specificity to that point. Otherwise, if there wasn't a specificity, why pass down 2 points? Just pass on the better of the two. So if you look at the dissection diagram on the right side here, where my cursor is pointing to, what you're looking at is the bicep muscle and the brachialis muscle splayed apart. In the classic, they call this flesh separations. In modern anatomy, it's called an intermuscular septum, where a nerve called the musculocutaneous nerve travels between. And lung 3 and lung 4 corresponds to branches of that nerve that innervates, respectively, the bicep and the brachialis. And the bicep brachialis does different functions. Bicep does flexion, so does brachialis, but bicep does flexion with a bit of supination. So I then went on to confirm these anatomy and into a needle technique, because anatomy is great, but at the end of the day, it's a bunch of dead bodies that's pretty not clinically applicable. So I want to translate that into a clinical skill and develop needle techniques. So in here, you're going to see an electrical device stimulating lung 3 and lung 4, which is stimulating different branches of that musculocutaneous nerve into different muscles. First, you can see that we have a flexion of the arm. That's the brachialis. Then you see a little supination of the forearm. Okay, I'll play that again. Focus down here. Flexion. Then you get a little bit of supination of the forearm. And that's because bicep can do that. So we then developed the technique to reliably reproduce the Dutch sensation based on the underlying neuroanatomy. Moving on to something on the face. This is a talk I gave as a community lecture on Healthy Seminar. I've published this research where we looked at the points on the face that have to do with the facial nerve, cranial nerve 7. Obviously, the clinical benefits could be for the Bell's palsy, for example. And I'll start with the granddaddy of all the facial nerve points with Sanjiao 17 behind the ear. And Sanjiao 17 will activate all the branches of the facial nerve, from the branch to the forehead, around the eyes, cheeks, chin, even branches behind the ear. We can see the ears and hairlines being pulled backwards. And I'll show you something that's interesting from a channel theory perspective. When I was doing this work, being a good acupuncture student back in the day, I remember studying channel theory, that points like small intestine 18, for example, was supposed to have a divergent channel that goes ... to the inner canthus, and therefore it can treat symptoms such as twitching of the eyelids that's been documented by our ancient ancestor practitioners. So is what really excites me about doing my research is that a lot of times the information about a new anatomy is not available. So then I've had to do dissection on my own. But before I stumbled upon that path, I was starting to see a pattern. I knew that it was just a matter of time that Western medicine did the research to explain the ancient channel theories. And this slide will give you an example of what I mean. What you're looking at here is a muscle called the procerus muscle that's located in your in-tongue or glabella area. And scientists have long thought that it is the branch that innervates the frontalis muscle that also innervates that muscle, because obviously the procerus and frontalis kind of close to each other. It makes sense. But they didn't realize until they did a bunch of dissection studies that it was actually the buccal branch, the branch to the cheek and the mouth, that sends a nerve branch that goes to the inner canthus of the eye. So when I realized this, I was, of course, elated, but at the same time comforted by the fact that ancient masters already passed this information down to us. And so therefore, what we learn in channel theory and acupuncture point location is 100% based on physical reality. So if you look at this video, where we stimulate simultaneously 18, look at the medial border of the eyebrow. Okay, you will see that there's a depression there, and that's due to the contraction of the procerus muscle. Moving on to examples on the torso. 2 points that really highlight this idea is gallbladder 22 and 23, which you probably don't use these points very often. But if you're interested in treating frozen shoulder, rotator cuff problems, you might be interested in these nerves because these nerves directly mobilize the scapula. My research has found that gallbladder 22 and 23 respectively target nerves called thoracodorsal nerve and long thoracic nerve. Here's a dissection that was published recently that shows a cadaver in sideline position with the arm adducted, with the latissimus dorsi shown here and the serratus anterior muscle shown here. Latissimus dorsi muscle is the muscle for rowing. Serratus anterior is the muscle that is responsible for an action of the scapula called protraction. So you can see two nerves very close to each other, which perfectly represented by these two acupuncture points. This video will demonstrate for you the difference in the mobilization of the scapula. Again, 2 points very close to each other, but the movement cannot be more different. Okay, so we'll move on to an example in the leg. Okay, so one thing I noticed in my research is that oftentimes ancient classics such as the systematic classic or Zhenjiu Jiayi Jing, also known as ABC of acupuncture, gives point location advice based on something called pulsating vessels, which unfortunately did not survive in the modern teachings of the point location. So kidney 3, for example, was a point that you're supposed to feel a pulsating vessel. But looking at the anatomy, we know that pulsating vessel is the posterior tibial artery, which forms a bundle with the tibial nerve. This is called a neurovascular bundle. So I think the ancients were telling us that to locate this point, you need to locate a neurovascular bundle. And we're going on to do some dissections to confirm this. You can see that this is the asterisk, the medial malleolus. At the level of that is kidney 3, where there's a pulsating vessel that can be felt. But interestingly, the tibial nerve will trifurcate into something called a medial calcaneal nerve, a lateral plantar nerve, and a medial plantar nerve, which just happen to perfectly superimpose kidney 3, 4, 5, and 6. So I began to kind of scratch my head and wonder, is the channel really doing the circular roller coaster loop-to-loop thing? Or is it really the points that are responsible for the specificity of the acupuncture point? And therefore, if you know the neuroanatomy of these points, you can predict that specificity in terms of its touchy sensation, but also in terms of clinical efficacy, obtain more reproducible results because you're simply more on point or more on target. So in this video here, you're going to see kidney 3, 4, 5, 6. Kidney 3 is a sensory nerve, so we're not going to see anything moving here, except the patient here is feeling a little bit of paresthesia or tingling to the heel. But looking at this video, you'll see that depending on whether you stimulate from above or below these two, different parts of the feet are going to move. First, you're going to see that both the big toe side and the baby toe side of the feet are moving together. But now if you only stimulate the lateral plantar nerve, you lose the activation of the medial plantar. And if you only stimulate the big medial plantar, then you lose the activation of the lateral plantar. The video one more time, okay? So this shows you how specific these points are, and certainly makes makes for the argument that acupuncture points are really, really specific and it is a map of the peripheral nervous system that ancient sages have passed down for us. And lastly, just to drive this point home, using again examples of channel theory to show that this is actually information that's coming straight from the classics. We all know that the kidney channel begins at the baby toe and it traverses the kidney 1 point on the bottom of the foot. Now, I'm going to show you a video in which we're stimulating kidney 5 on the medial aspect of the ankle, and you can see something very comical happen there. You can see that the little baby toe does a little waving at you. So I want to also remind everybody that these nerves that are being stimulated is both sensory and motor. So even though we're seeing the effect of the motor, some people might argue, oh yeah, but in ancient times there's no electricity, so there wouldn't be movement, things like that. But these nerves are sensory and motor. So if you stimulated that, the patient would still feel a sensation that goes tingling into the baby toe. And if you actually have experience with regular manual acupuncture, when the patient feels a sensation, it makes the body do a little twitching movement without electricity. In any case, I hope that gives you a gist of what my research is about, systematically annotating the target acupuncture points and developing the needle techniques that goes with that to confirm that you are really on point.